Hey everybody, David from Flash Buggy CycleNet here. I'm going to do a video comparing the 2022 MT09 to a 2022 MT10. See this question come up a lot, and I'm fortunate enough to have both motorcycles, and I've jumped off and on one from the other quite a bit over the last several months, so I think I can do a fair comparison for you people. So let's talk about the biggest difference between the two bikes right away. This is a dyno run comparing the bikes, both bikes stock, just with my ECU flash. The blue line is the MT09, and it has 116 horsepower and 70 foot-pounds of torque, where the MT10 has a whopping 158 horsepower with 82 foot-pounds of torque. The MT10 is about 50 pounds heavier and does have taller gearing. So when you look at these a little closer, below 7,000 RPMs, the bikes are pretty similar as far as power output, and that's what it feels like on the road. They feel very similar until that 7,000 RPM. Once you get above 7,000 RPM, it's no comparison. The MT10 yanks, where the MT09 kind of flattens out a bit more than the MT10. Let's start with talking about seating position and how you sit on them. On the MT09, I more feel like I sit on top of it. I find the bars a little high for my liking, where I didn't feel like I could get enough weight over the front end. If you look at the triangle position of handlebar to seat to foot peg, it's a very comfortable bike, very upright sitting. So my only complaint was that I didn't feel like I could get enough weight over the front end, so I did put these monster bar risers on them to drop the bars a little bit, which helped, but in the end still did not make it feel as good as the front end on the MT10. The MT10, I more feel like I sit in instead of on, and I get better feel from the front end with it. It could have something to do with the better suspension, better front forks, and the shock of the two bikes. But I definitely feel that the MT10 is more planted, where the MT09 feels more busy. The MT09 is more of, I would say, a hooligan bike, where the MT10 is better at carving corners. Surprisingly, the MT10 is a couple inches shorter than the MT09. I would have definitely guessed the other way. But when I put them on the dyno, then you can see, or I could see, that the MT10 was actually shorter. Next, let's look at the dashboards of each bike. First, the MT09. They have similar information on them. One of the things I don't like about the MT09 is to see different settings on your dashboard. You have to roll this little wheel here, highlight the thing you want to change, and then you can change it to what you want it to be. That's pretty much a pain in the ass when you are riding. Otherwise, how you change the modes, the power mode and traction control mode and all that are very similar. You have a mode button and an up and down. You got a high beam, high to pass, your headlights, your horn, all your normal stuff. And the dashboard does include quite a bit of information. I have the factory heated grips on mine, which is kind of nice. Where you can control them right through the dashboard, but again, it requires pushing and rolling the wheel. On to the MT10. Dash contains a lot of the same information. Tack and bar graph tack, which I'm not crazy about. You got to the fuel gauge is a little different. Yamaha does this really weird shit on their fuel gauges. If you look, that first bar that you would assume is 3/4 is actually only half. So much like the fuel gauge on the MT09, it clings to full, and then drops like a rock. I guess, whatever. As far as scrolling through the menus, I like the fact that you can just scroll and it changes, and you don't have to push the button to actually change stuff. Again, I have the heated grips that are controlled through the dashboard. Your modes and stuff are set up here with another toggle up and down. It has a couple nice features, we have cruise control, which is really kind of nice. It also has a feature where like you can limit your speed, and it's pretty easy to set. I honestly haven't ever used it. I guess I could see on some roads where you'd use it where you'd say like, I don't want to go to jail. So the speed limit's 55 and I'll set this at 70 or whatever. And the bike literally stops pulling when it gets to 70. Kind of cool, but I haven't used it. You also have a cigarette type charger, barrel charger that's included. Not sure why they wouldn't include that on the MT09, but that's a nice feature. So overall, the MT10 gets, for my pick, a better dash, better use of controls, and easier to switch, and a couple extra features that the MT09 does not have. Styling and beauty is always in the eye of the beholder. Both bikes have kind of controversial headlights. I've had people just been losing their mind about the new headlight and how horrible it is on the MT10. I don't agree. And the same thing has happened with the MT09. I do have that little like bug deflector kind of thing on the front of it. Kind of a Cyclops look to it. I will say that like when every new generation bike comes out, us as motorcycle riders seem to be pretty hesitant for change. And people always complain about whatever new looks, things that they have done, and say the old bike is better looking. And then in 4 or 5 years, usually the old bike looks dated and the new bike looks fresh still. Happened when the MT09 changed in 17. People complained about the new headlight, and it just is what it is. Overall, as far as overall looks, I mean, they're not that far apart. And again, I would say that's more opinion than anything. Exhaust sound wise, this again would be very much personal preference. I do have the stock exhaust back on the MT09 in this moment, so it's got a nice little growl and rumble. Kind of disappointing when you get on it with the stock exhaust. With an aftermarket exhaust, it obviously sounds better. And nobody's ever really complained that a CP3 motor sounds horrible. On my MT10, I just have a decat pipe, so it has a nice crack to it. Nice crack when you roll the throttle. As somebody that religiously watches MotoGP, I do gotta say I have a soft spot for the sound of the CP4 motor, and have since 2009, when they introduced the first cross-plane 4-cylinder R1. This is my 3rd one I've owned, and yeah, I really do enjoy the sound of them. Again, the MT09 sounds great, but I do prefer the sound of the MT10. So let's talk about what they're like to ride. Both bikes to me are pretty decent at the task of commuting or around town riding. They both love the wheelie off of stop signs or red lights. I don't find either of them cumbersome at slow speeds. And while obviously we'd like to be on open, fast roads all the time, that's not always possible. And I think they both do a good job of taking care of the daily grind and that kind of stuff. The MT09, like I alluded to earlier, for me is more of a hooligan bike. It wants to just wheelie, stoppy, and do things like that. It's, for me, not very confident inspiring when the pavement gets rough, or when I'm really trying to aggressively corner on it, because like I said, I can't feel that I get enough weight over the front end or feel like I get enough front end feedback. The MT10 also really loves the wheelie. Both have wheelie control on them, and both with them in the one or the least obtrusive will let you ride a wheelie through 2nd gear, which is really all I like to do anyway. So I'm not a big wheelie guy, so can't really comment of what is the better wheelie machine, but I would say in the end it's probably the MT09. They both will wheelie in 2nd or 3rd gear without a clutch once they're tuned. One of the things to speak about is the MT10 does respond. Let's look at the braking system of each bike. In the MT10, we have the Brembo Radio Master with these rotors here that I can't really tell you what would make them completely different, but they are very different rotors. And our master cylinder in the MT09 is a Nissan Radio Master cylinder. For most riding that most people do, I think both brake systems are pretty adequate. When you get to where you're hard charging some corners, I felt like the MT09 could use some more power and feel, and then maybe a brake pad change would change that. The MT10s, I've yet to find a place where I felt that the brakes were really lacking. I haven't had it at a racetrack yet, and that might change those opinions. But on the street, even for fairly hard street riding, they've been both pretty good. The rear brake, they both work. Nothing really remarkable to report about either. One of the things the MT10 has that I wish the MT09 did have that it doesn't is this steering stabilizer. With the MT10, even with it being shorter, like I've said before, it does feel more stable and planted in corners. Between no steering stabilizer, between the ability to float the tire in third gear, and with not as much weight on the front end, the MT09 does get a bit flighty on the front end, and can at times give you a bit of a pucker factor with it. I've seen a lot of people put a steering stabilizer on them, but I'm sure that does help, but obviously added cost. Both bikes have these really shitty turn signals that pop out if you bank into them too hard. Both bikes have pretty poor passenger accommodations. I wouldn't want to be in the back of either one. Both bikes respond really well to a flash. The MT10, it does make more power and more improvements in flash, from the flash. Also, I would say stock fueling, they're pretty similar, where they're not horrible like the previous years, but they both are much improved in smoothness and on-off throttle response with the flash. Overall, I don't think you can go wrong with either bike. They have a slightly different strengths. They're both fun as hell to ride. It's kind of sometimes hard to decide which one I want to go to. I generally pick the MT10 if I'm just going out for fun, but that's because I like to go through corners like I'm talking about. I'm not really a huge hooligan type guy, so for me the MT10 better suits the type of riding I do most of the time. I do like the cruise control on it also. It's kind of nice to have. But interesting to note, on the new MT10, for cruise control to work, the O2 sensors must remain plugged in, the AIS must remain plugged in, and the exhaust valve must remain plugged in. On the MT09, if you have the SP, the only thing that it has of those three is the O2 sensor, so that must remain plugged into the harness for your cruise control to work. I hope my video helps some people make a decision. You can't go wrong with either one. They're both winning bikes in my opinion, and Yamaha makes a really great motorcycle. Thanks a lot, guys. Flash by VCycleNut. For all your flashing needs, vcyclenut.com is my website. If you don't know, appreciate you giving me a chance to earn your business. Thank you much.